Ethan Moore thought he had his life figured out until the day he collapsed in his own home, gasping for breath with only one person close enough to save him. The same person he'd told just days before that he could never trust a black woman. The same person whose steady hands and quick thinking kept him alive while paramedics raced through the streets. Now, as he stares into Naomi Carter's eyes, feeling his heart pound for reasons that have nothing to do with his medical condition, he realizes that everything he believed about trust, about love, about himself, is about to shatter. What happens when the man who swore off vulnerability finds himself completely dependent on the woman he thought he could never trust? And what happens when she discovers the devastating secret behind his prejudice, a secret that could either heal them both or destroy any chance they have at happiness? If you're hooked and want to see how this impossible love story unfolds, hit subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from. The kitchen stood silent in the early morning light. Ethan Moore moved through it like a ghost, his footsteps barely making a sound on the cold tile floor. Empty takeout containers sat stacked by the sink. Unopened mail covered the counter in neat piles he never seemed to get to. He pulled a piece of toast from the toaster and ate it dry, standing by the window. Outside, his neighbors were already starting their day. Mrs. Chen watered her flowers. The Johnsons walked their dog. Normal people doing normal things. Ethan wasn't sure he remembered how to be normal anymore. The phone rang, cutting through the quiet. He glanced at the caller ID and sighed. Aunt Mary Ann. Again. Hello, Mary Ann. Ethan, honey, did you go to that doctor appointment yesterday? He rubbed his forehead. Yes, I went. And? And nothing. I'm fine. There was a pause. Ethan could practically hear her organizing her thoughts, getting ready to lecture him. Mary Ann had been doing that since he was 12 years old. Dr. Reynolds called me, she said finally. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. He what? He's worried about you. He said you had another episode. Your blood pressure was through the roof, and you looked like you hadn't slept in weeks. He had no right to call you. He has every right when you're not taking care of yourself. Mary Ann's voice rose. Ethan, you can't keep living like this. Emma's been gone for 2 years. 2 years, honey. The name hit him like a punch to the chest. Emma, his wife, his everything, gone because he trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. I have to go, he said. No, you don't. You're going to listen to me for once. Mary Ann took a breath. Dr. Reynolds gave you specific instructions about your diet. You need to eat real food, vegetables, lean protein, things that will help your blood pressure instead of making it worse. I eat. Pizza and Chinese takeout don't count. Ethan looked at the empty containers by his sink. She had a point. I can take care of myself, he said, but even he didn't believe it anymore. When was the last time you cooked a real meal? When was the last time you had anyone over? When was the last time you did anything except go to work and come home? He didn't answer because he couldn't. The truth was, he'd stopped doing most things after Emma died. Stopped cooking, stopped inviting friends over, stopped believing that other people could be trusted not to hurt him, especially women, especially black women. The thought made his stomach turn, but he couldn't shake it. Dr. Angela Washington had been Emma's oncologist. Emma had trusted her completely, had called her brilliant, caring, dedicated, right up until Dr. Washington made the mistake that cost Emma her life, a mistake she'd tried to cover up, a mistake that might have been prevented if she'd been more careful, more focused, more concerned about her patient than her reputation. I'm hiring you a personal chef, Mary Ann said, pulling him back to the conversation. You're what? A personal chef, someone who can come in, cook healthy meals, make sure you're eating right, just temporarily, until you get back on your feet. Absolutely not. It's not up for discussion. Mary Ann, I said no. And I said it's not up for discussion. I already found someone. She comes highly recommended. She'll start this afternoon. Ethan felt his blood pressure rising again. She. Her name is Naomi Carter. She's very professional, very skilled. She'll prepare your meals according to Dr. Reynolds' guidelines and... No. The word came out harder than he intended. No women, no strangers in my house. I don't want anyone here. Ethan. I mean it, Mary Ann. Cancel it. I'll figure something out on my own. There was a long pause. When Mary Ann spoke again, her voice was softer. Honey, I know you're hurting. I know Emma's death was devastating, but you can't shut out the whole world forever. I'm not shutting out the world. I'm just being careful. Careful of what? He didn't answer. How could he explain that he was careful of hope, careful of trusting anyone who might let him down when it mattered most, careful of opening his heart to anyone who might break it worse than it was already broken? She'll be there at 2 o'clock, Marianne said. Give her a chance, for me, for Emma, for yourself. Before he could argue, she hung up. Ethan stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down harder than necessary. He looked around his kitchen, his empty, quiet, safe kitchen, and felt something twist in his chest. He didn't want a stranger here. He didn't want to have to make conversation or pretend to be okay. He didn't want to trust anyone with something as basic as his food, his health, his daily routine. But as he looked at the takeout containers and the unopened mail and the dust gathering on surfaces he used to keep spotless, he had to admit Marianne was right about one thing. He wasn't taking care of himself. He was barely surviving. Maybe it was time to try something different, even if it scared him. Naomi Carter pulled her car into the driveway and took a deep breath. The house was beautiful. A 2-story colonial with a perfectly maintained yard and flower boxes under every window. It looked like the kind of place where happy families lived, where people barbecued on weekends and had birthday parties for their kids. She grabbed her portfolio and purse, checking her appearance in the rearview mirror one more time. First impressions mattered in her business. Clients needed to trust her, and trust started with confidence. She'd done her homework on Ethan Moore. 30 years old, recently widowed, worked as an architect for a firm downtown. His aunt had been the one to call, worried about his health and eating habits. It wasn't an unusual situation. Naomi had worked with several clients who were struggling to take care of themselves after major life changes. What was unusual was the way Mrs. Moore had hesitated when Naomi asked about dietary restrictions. He's particular about who he allows in his space, she'd said. He's been through a lot. Please be patient with him. Naomi had heard similar warnings before. Grieving people could be difficult. They could be angry, sad, unpredictable. She'd learned to roll with it, to be the calm presence they needed while they worked through their pain. She walked up to the front door and rang the bell. After a moment, she heard footsteps. The door opened to reveal a tall man with dark hair and tired eyes. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. His clothes were wrinkled, and there was a wariness in his expression that made her want to step back. Mr. Moore, I'm Naomi Carter. Your aunt hired me to... I know why you're here. His voice was flat, almost cold. Come in. She followed him into the house, noting how quiet it was. No music playing, no television in the background, just the sound of their footsteps on the hardwood floor. The kitchen was large and clearly expensive, but it felt unused. The counters were clean but empty. The stove looked like it hadn't been turned on in months. It was the kitchen of someone who had given up on cooking, maybe given up on a lot of things. My aunt says you're supposed to help with my diet, Ethan said, not looking at her. That's right. I understand Dr. Reynolds has given you specific guidelines for managing your blood pressure. You talked to my doctor? Your aunt shared his recommendations with me. I'll need to see them myself, of course, but I can work with any dietary restrictions or health requirements you have. Ethan finally looked at her, and she was struck by the sadness in his eyes. But there was something else there, too, something that made her uncomfortable. Let me make something clear, he said. This is a professional arrangement. You cook, I eat, you leave. I don't want conversations. I don't want to get to know you. I don't want you rearranging my kitchen or making suggestions about my life. Naomi nodded. She'd worked with difficult clients before. I understand. Do you? He stepped closer and she caught a whiff of his cologne mixed with something sadder, the scent of someone who wasn't taking care of himself. Because I get the feeling you're the type of woman who thinks she can fix things, fix people. The way he said woman made something cold settle in her stomach. There was a particular tone there, a particular emphasis that she'd heard before, usually from men who had issues with women in general or black women in particular. I'm here to cook healthy meals, she said carefully. Nothing more. Good. Because I don't trust easily, especially women who look like they have all the answers. He paused, his eyes scanning her face. Especially black women. The words hung in the air between them like a slap. Naomi felt her face grow hot, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd dealt with racism before, though rarely so direct, so casual. "I see," she said quietly. "Do you?" "Because the last black woman I trusted cost me everything that mattered. So let's be clear about what this is. You're here because my aunt thinks I need help. I think I need to be left alone. We're going to try it your way for 2 weeks. If it doesn't work out, you're gone." Naomi looked at him for a long moment. She could walk away right now. Should walk away. She'd never had to work for someone who made their prejudice so clear from the start. But there was something in his eyes that stopped her. Under the anger and the coldness, there was pain. Real, deep pain. And despite what he'd just said, despite the way he'd said it, she found herself curious about what had happened to him, what had made him so afraid. 2 weeks, she said. "I can do 2 weeks. Professional only." Professional only. He nodded, looking almost surprised that she'd agreed. "I'll show you where everything is. Grocery money is in the drawer by the refrigerator. I don't care what you cook as long as it follows the doctor's orders." As he walked her through the kitchen, pointing out cabinets and appliances, Naomi made mental notes. Not just about where things were, but about him. The way he avoided eye contact. The way his hands shook slightly when he opened the drawer with the grocery money. The way he kept glancing toward a photo on the counter, a picture of him with a beautiful woman with kind eyes. His wife, she realized. The woman he'd lost. Whatever had happened to make him so distrustful, so angry, it had happened around the time he lost the person he loved most. That didn't excuse what he'd said to her, but it helped her understand it. "I'll start tomorrow morning," she said when he'd finished the tour. 7 o'clock, if that works for you." "Fine." She headed toward the front door, then paused. "Mr. Moore." He looked at her warily. "What?" "I'm sorry for your loss." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or pain. "Thank you," he said quietly. As Naomi walked back to her car, she found herself thinking about the sadness in his eyes and the bitterness in his voice. About the empty kitchen and the woman in the photograph. She should probably find a way out of this job. Working for someone who'd made his feelings about black women so clear was asking for trouble. But as she drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan Moore wasn't a bad man. He was a hurt man, a scared man, a man who'd learned to protect himself by pushing others away. She'd worked with difficult people before. She'd even worked with prejudiced people before, though none who'd been quite so upfront about it. 2 weeks, she told herself. She could handle 2 weeks of anything. The question was whether 2 weeks would be enough to figure out what had broken Ethan Moore so badly that he couldn't trust the very people who were trying to help him. The next morning, Ethan stood at his bedroom window and watched Naomi's car pull into his driveway at exactly 7 o'clock. She was punctual, at least. That was something. He'd spent most of the night lying awake, replaying their conversation and feeling sick about it. He'd been cruel. Unnecessarily cruel. The woman was just trying to do her job, and he'd made his prejudices clear from the start. But he couldn't seem to help himself. Every time he looked at her, he thought of Dr. Washington. Every time he heard her voice, professional and calm, he remembered sitting in an office while another professional, calm voice explained how a simple mistake had become a fatal one. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs. He could hear movement in the kitchen, the soft sounds of someone who knew their way around a cooking space. It had been a long time since there were cooking sounds in his house. Emma used to cook. She'd loved it, actually. Used to dance around the kitchen while she made dinner, singing off-key to whatever music was playing. The house had always smelled like food back then, like warmth and life and home. Now it just smelled empty. He paused in the doorway to the kitchen, watching Naomi work. She moved efficiently, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator and arranging them on the counter with practiced ease. She'd already started coffee. He could smell it brewing. "Good morning, Mr. Moore," she said without turning around. "Morning." He poured himself a cup of coffee, noting that it was exactly the way he liked it, strong but not bitter. "How did you know how I take my coffee?" "Your aunt told me." She cracked eggs into a bowl with smooth, practiced motions. "She said you drink it black, no sugar." Of course, Marianne had told her. His aunt had probably given her a complete rundown of his preferences, his schedule, his whole life story. "What are you making?" Vegetable omelet. With herbs, whole grain toast, fresh fruit. She glanced at Dr. Reynolds's dietary guidelines, which she'd taped to the inside of a cabinet door. Low sodium, high fiber, heart healthy. Sounds riveting. If his sarcasm bothered her, she didn't show it. She just continued cooking with the same calm efficiency she'd displayed since she arrived. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, trying not to watch her work. But it was hard to look away. There was something soothing about the way she moved, the way she seemed to know exactly what she was doing without having to think about it. "Here you go," she said, setting a plate in front of him. The omelet was perfectly golden, filled with colorful vegetables and fresh herbs. The toast was lightly buttered, and the fruit looked like it had been arranged by someone who cared about presentation. It was the most appealing meal he'd seen in months. "Thank you," she nodded and began cleaning up, moving quietly around the kitchen while he ate. The omelet was delicious, light and flavorful and somehow comforting, despite being exactly the kind of healthy food he usually avoided. "This is good," he said, surprising himself. "I'm glad you like it." Her voice was neutral, professional. No warmth, but no coldness either. Just the voice of someone doing her job. They didn't talk after that. Ethan finished his breakfast while Naomi cleaned the kitchen, leaving everything spotless. When she was done, she gathered her things and headed for the door. "I'll be back tomorrow at 7, she said. "Fine." After she left, Ethan sat in his quiet kitchen, looking at his empty plate. For the first time in months, he'd eaten a real breakfast. For the first time in months, his kitchen had felt alive. It should have made him happy. Instead, it made him feel guilty. Because enjoying Naomi's cooking felt like betraying Emma's memory. Because trusting another woman, any woman, but especially a black woman, felt like forgetting the lesson he'd learned the hard way. Because for just a moment, while he was eating that perfectly prepared omelet, he'd felt almost normal. Almost like the man he used to be before loss and betrayal taught him that being careful was the only way to survive. He looked at the photo of Emma on the counter. She was smiling in the picture, her eyes bright with the kind of joy he wasn't sure he'd ever feel again. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty kitchen. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I trusted the wrong person. I'm sorry I failed you." The words hung in the silence, as empty and cold as everything else in his life had become. But somewhere, buried deep under all the guilt and anger and fear, a tiny voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, eating a good meal wasn't a betrayal. Maybe taking care of himself was exactly what Emma would have wanted. Maybe it was time to stop punishing himself for someone else's mistakes. The thought scared him more than anything else he'd felt in 2 years. Because if he stopped punishing himself, if he stopped being angry, if he stopped pushing everyone away, what would be left? What would be left of the man who had loved Emma more than his own life? And what would be left of the promise he'd made to never trust anyone enough to hurt him like that again? 3 days passed in the same quiet routine. Naomi arrived at 7, cooked breakfast, cleaned up, and left without much conversation. Ethan ate the meals she prepared, all of them delicious, all of them exactly what his doctor had ordered, and tried to ignore how much better he felt. His energy was returning. His sleep was improving. Even his mood seemed lighter, though he fought against acknowledging it. On Thursday morning, everything changed. Ethan was in his home office reviewing blueprints for a new project when he heard the familiar sounds of Naomi working in the kitchen. She was preparing lunch, something with chicken and vegetables that smelled incredible even from upstairs. He stood up to stretch and felt a sharp pain shoot through his chest. For a moment, he thought he'd just moved wrong. Then the pain came again, stronger this time, radiating down his left arm. His vision blurred. The room seemed to tilt sideways. He reached for his desk to steady himself, but his legs gave out. He hit the floor hard, the blueprints scattering around him. The last thing he remembered was calling out for help and hoping someone would hear him. Naomi was seasoning the chicken when she heard the crash. She paused, listening. Sometimes Ethan dropped things upstairs, books, papers, whatever he was working on. But this sounded different, heavier. Then she heard her name, faint and strained, coming from somewhere above her. She turned off the stove and ran toward the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. His office door was open, and she could see him on the floor, conscious but clearly in distress. "Mr. Moore." She knelt beside him, her mind automatically running through the basic first aid training she'd taken years ago. "What's happening? Where does it hurt?" "Chest," he managed to say. Can't breathe right. His skin was pale and clammy. His breathing was shallow and quick. A heart attack was the first thought that came to mind, but she forced herself to stay calm and think clearly. Okay, I'm going to call 911, she said, pulling out her phone. Just try to stay still and breathe slowly. While she waited for the dispatcher to answer, she helped him into a more comfortable position, propped against the wall. His color was already improving slightly, and his breathing seemed a little easier. 911, what's your emergency? I have a 30-year-old male with chest pain and difficulty breathing. He's conscious, but in distress. The dispatcher walked her through basic questions about his symptoms and condition. Throughout the call, Naomi kept one hand on Ethan's wrist, monitoring his pulse, and maintained steady eye contact with him. The paramedics are on their way, she told him after hanging up. How are you feeling now? Better, he said quietly. A little better. Good. Your pulse is steady and your color's coming back. Just keep breathing slowly and try to relax. They sat in silence for a few minutes, Naomi watching him carefully for any changes in his condition. She could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. Why did you stay? Ethan asked suddenly. What do you mean? After what I said to you, about trust, about black women. His voice was hoarse, whether from the medical episode or embarrassment, she couldn't tell. Why didn't you just leave? Naomi considered the question. She'd asked herself the same thing several times over the past few days. Because you were in pain, she said simply. And pain makes people say things they don't always mean. I meant it when I said it. I know you did. That's what made it painful. The sirens were closer now. She could hear them turning onto his street. I'm scared, he admitted, so quietly she almost didn't hear him. Of the ambulance, the hospital. Of trusting you, of trusting anyone. He looked directly at her for the first time since she'd been working for him. Of being wrong again. Before she could respond, the paramedics arrived. The next 20 minutes were a blur of medical equipment, questions, and preparations for transport to the hospital. Ethan's condition had stabilized, but they wanted to take him in for observation and tests. As they loaded him onto the stretcher, he caught Naomi's hand. Will you... He stopped, looking embarrassed. Will I what? Will you call my aunt? And maybe... Could you stay tonight? At the house? Just in case they release me and I need... Of course, she said without hesitation. I'll take care of everything. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. As the ambulance pulled away, Naomi stood in the driveway, realizing that something fundamental had just changed between them. For a few minutes, Ethan had needed her, not as a professional service provider, but as another human being who happened to be there when he was vulnerable and scared. And despite everything he'd said about trust in black women and keeping his distance, he'd asked her to stay. The hospital discharged Ethan that evening with instructions to follow up with Dr. Reynolds and continue monitoring his blood pressure and stress levels. The episode had been a warning, they said, his body telling him that the grief and isolation and poor self-care were taking a serious toll. Naomi picked him up at 8 o'clock, finding him quiet and subdued in the passenger seat of her car. How do you feel? She asked as they drove toward his house. Embarrassed? Grateful? Confused? He was quiet for a moment. Dr. Martinez said you probably saved my life. You saved your own life by calling for help. I just helped coordinate the response. That's not how he described it. He said your quick thinking and the way you handled the situation kept me stable until the paramedics arrived. He said most people panic in situations like that. Naomi shrugged. I had some training a few years ago, basic emergency response. It's not as complicated as people think. You just have to stay calm and follow the steps. Still, thank you. When they got to the house, she helped him settle on the couch in the living room. The doctor had said he should take it easy for the next few days, avoid stairs when possible, and definitely avoid stress. Are you hungry? She asked. I could finish making the lunch I started or cook something else if you prefer. Actually, yes, I'm starving. Hospital food isn't exactly appealing. While she heated up the chicken and vegetables she'd been preparing when he collapsed, Ethan sat quietly on the couch, looking around his living room as if seeing it for the first time. This house is too quiet, he said when she brought him his plate. What do you mean? It used to be full of noise. Music, conversation, laughter. My wife loved to have people over. She was always cooking for friends, hosting dinner parties, filling every room with life. Naomi settled into the chair across from him. What was she like? Emma? His face softened. She was everything I'm not. Open, trusting, optimistic. She saw the best in everyone, made friends everywhere she went. She sounds wonderful. She was, too wonderful for her own good sometimes. There was something bitter in his voice now, a hardness that made Naomi careful about her next words. What happened to her, if you don't mind me asking? Ethan was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat and distant. Cancer. Ovarian cancer. By the time they found it, it was already advanced, but the doctor said they caught it in time. Said the treatment plan would give her a real chance. He set down his fork and stared at his hands. Dr. Angela Washington was her oncologist. Emma loved her, said she was brilliant, caring, the best in the city. Emma trusted her completely. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. She was beginning to understand where this story was going. Dr. Washington made a mistake with Emma's treatment schedule. Mixed up her chart with another patient's. Instead of getting the aggressive chemotherapy she needed, Emma got a much milder treatment for 3 weeks. By the time they caught the error, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Oh, Ethan," Naomi whispered. "I'm so sorry." The worst part was how Dr. Washington handled it. She tried to cover it up at first, claimed it was a systemic error, not her fault. When Emma got sicker, when it became clear the cancer was spreading, Dr. Washington kept insisting the treatment was working. She kept lying, even when Emma was dying. Tears were running down his cheeks now, but his voice remained steady. Emma died, believing that her doctor had done everything possible to save her. She never knew about the mistake, never knew that the person she trusted most had failed her when it mattered most. Naomi sat in silence, absorbing the weight of his story. No wonder he'd said what he said about black women. No wonder he was so guarded, so afraid to trust. "But you know," she said carefully, "I found out afterward. During the investigation, Dr. Washington lost her license, but that didn't bring Emma back. Didn't change the fact that if I'd been more careful, if I'd asked more questions, if I hadn't just trusted blindly—" "Stop," Naomi said firmly. "You can't blame yourself for someone else's mistake." "Can't I? I was Emma's husband. I was supposed to protect her. From cancer? From a doctor's error? Ethan, you're not responsible for what happened to your wife." He looked at her with eyes full of pain and doubt. "How do you know? How can you be so sure?" "Because I've been there," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" Naomi hesitated. She'd never told this story to a client before, had barely told it to anyone. But something about this moment, about his honesty and his pain, made her want to be equally honest. 5 years ago, I was engaged to a man named Marcus. We'd been together for 3 years. I thought I knew him completely, thought he was honest and faithful, and everything I wanted in a partner. She took a deep breath. A week before our wedding, I found out he'd been cheating on me for over a year. Not just cheating, he'd been living a double life, had a whole other relationship with someone else, someone who thought she was his only girlfriend. Ethan listened intently. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it, didn't apologize, just told me I'd been naive to think I was enough for him. Said I should have known better than to trust a man completely. That's horrible. It was. But you know what the worst part was? For months afterward, I blamed myself. I thought if I'd been more suspicious, if I'd asked more questions, if I'd been less trusting, I would have seen the signs. But you couldn't have known. Exactly. She looked directly at him. Just like you couldn't have known about Dr. Washington's mistake, just like Emma couldn't have known. Trust isn't naive, Ethan. It's necessary. Without it, we can't have relationships. We can't build anything meaningful with other people. But what if you trust the wrong person again? Then you deal with it when it happens. But you don't stop living because someone else failed you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the sun was setting, casting warm light through the living room windows. "I said some terrible things to you," Ethan said finally. "Yes, you did. I'm sorry. Not just for today, but for everything I said when you started working here. You didn't deserve that. No, I didn't. But I understand. Why you said it. Do you? Because I'm not sure I understand it myself anymore. Naomi smiled. Fear makes us do strange things, makes us hurt people who don't deserve it, makes us push away the very people who might be able to help us heal. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you're scared. I think you've been scared for 2 years. And I think today, for the first time in a long time, you realize that being scared all the time is more dangerous than taking a chance on trusting someone. Ethan considered this. When I was lying on that floor, waiting for the paramedics, you know what I thought about? What? How stupid it would be to die alone because I was too afraid to let anyone get close enough to help me. And what do you think about that now? He looked around his quiet house, then back at her. I think maybe it's time to stop being so afraid. As the evening wore on, they talked more easily than they ever had before. About Emma, about Marcus, about grief and healing, and the complicated business of learning to trust again. For the first time since she'd started working for him, Naomi saw glimpses of the man Ethan had been before loss changed him. He was funny, thoughtful, kind, the kind of person who would have been a devoted husband, a loyal friend, the kind of person who deserved better than the isolation he'd built around himself. When it was time for bed, Naomi settled into the guest room, leaving her door slightly open so she could hear if Ethan needed anything during the night. As she lay in the dark, she thought about the day's events, about the moment when Ethan had grabbed her hand in his office, when all the barriers between them had temporarily collapsed, about the way he'd looked at her in the ambulance, not as a black woman or a stranger or someone to be suspicious of, but as a person who was helping him when he needed it most. Something had changed between them today. Some wall had come down, some trust had been built. The question was what they would do with it tomorrow. The next morning, Naomi woke to the sound of movement downstairs. She checked her phone, 6:30 a.m. Ethan was supposed to be resting, not wandering around the house before dawn. She pulled on her robe and padded downstairs, finding him in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker like it was some complicated piece of machinery. "What are you doing up so early?" she asked. He turned, looking sheepish. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd make coffee, but I can't remember how you made it taste so good the other day." "You're supposed to be taking it easy." "I am taking it easy. Making coffee isn't exactly strenuous activity." Naomi moved him gently aside and started the coffee herself. "How do you feel? Any chest pain? Shortness of breath?" "No, nothing like that. I actually feel better than I have in months." He paused. "Physically, anyway. But everything else feels different. Like something shifted yesterday, and I'm not sure how to handle it." She understood what he meant. The crisis had changed something between them. The professional distance they'd maintained was gone, replaced by something more personal, more complicated. "We don't have to figure it out all at once," she said, handing him a mug of coffee. "We can just take it one day at a time." "Is that what you want? To figure it out?" The question caught her off guard. She'd been so focused on helping him through the immediate crisis that she hadn't stopped to think about what came next. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I know I can't go back to pretending yesterday didn't happen. I know I can't go back to being just the woman who cooks your meals and leaves without conversation." "Good, because I don't think I can go back to that either." They drank their coffee in comfortable silence, watching the sun come up through the kitchen window. It felt domestic, natural, like something they'd been doing for years instead of days. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said. "Of course. Yesterday when I was telling you about Emma and Dr. Washington, you didn't act surprised. About the racial aspect, I mean. Have you dealt with that before? People who had issues with black women specifically?" Naomi considered how to answer. "More often than I'd like. Usually it's more subtle than what you said to me, but yes. Some people have a hard time trusting black women in positions of authority or care. They have ideas about who we are, how we behave, what we're capable of." "What kind of ideas?" "That we're angry, incompetent, untrustworthy, that we don't care about others, especially white people." She met his eyes. "Sound familiar?" Ethan winced. "I'm ashamed of what I said to you." "I know you are. The question is, do you still believe it?" "No," he said without hesitation. I don't think I ever really believed it about you specifically. I was just so angry, so scared of being hurt again, that I used the first excuse I could find to keep you at a distance. And now? Now I think you might be one of the most trustworthy people I've ever met, and I think I've been an idiot. Before Naomi could respond, the doorbell rang. Ethan started to get up, but she waved him back down. I'll get it. You're still supposed to be resting. She opened the front door to find an older white woman with perfectly styled gray hair and worried eyes. The woman looked Naomi up and down, taking in her robe and the fact that she was clearly comfortable in Ethan's house. You must be the cook, the woman said coolly. I'm Naomi Carter, and you are? Marianne Moore, Ethan's aunt. She stepped past Naomi into the house without being invited. Where is he? I got his message about the hospital, but he didn't answer his phone this morning. Naomi closed the door and followed Marianne toward the kitchen, already sensing this conversation wasn't going to go well. Aunt Marianne, Ethan said, standing up when they entered the kitchen. You didn't need to come over. I told you I was fine. You collapsed yesterday and spent the evening in the hospital. That's not what I call fine. Marianne's eyes moved between Ethan and Naomi, clearly noting the domestic scene, the 2 coffee cups, Naomi's robe, the comfortable way they'd been sitting together. I see you've been well taken care of. There was something in her tone that made Naomi's shoulders tense, a subtle disapproval that she'd heard many times before. Naomi saved my life yesterday, Ethan said firmly. If she hadn't been here, if she hadn't acted as quickly as she did, I could have died. I'm sure she was very helpful. Marianne's smile was tight. But don't you think it's a bit inappropriate for her to be staying here overnight? What will the neighbors think? I don't care what the neighbors think. Well, you should. You have a reputation to maintain, a professional image. Having the help living in your house sends the wrong message. The help? Naomi repeated quietly. Marianne turned to her, and for a moment her mask slipped. I'm sure you're a very nice girl, dear. But you have to understand how this looks. A young black woman staying overnight in a widower's house? People will talk. They'll get the wrong idea. What kind of wrong idea? Ethan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. You know exactly what I mean. They'll think she's taking advantage of your grief, your vulnerability. They'll think she's trying to insert herself into your life in ways that aren't appropriate. Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. This was worse than Ethan's original hostility because it was wrapped in fake politeness, couched as concern. Aunt Marianne, Ethan said, standing up straighter. Naomi stayed because I asked her to, because I was scared and alone and needed someone I trusted to be here. There was nothing inappropriate about it. Trusted? Marianne laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ethan, honey, you barely know this woman. You can't just trust people because they happen to be here when you need help. You have to be more careful than that. More careful of what? Of people who might take advantage of your situation, your grief, your money. She glanced at Naomi again. I'm sure she's told you all about her own struggles, her own problems. That's what they do, you know. They make you feel sorry for them so you'll let your guard down. Stop. Ethan's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Just stop talking. I'm trying to protect you. No, you're not. You're being racist and cruel and completely wrong about everything. Marianne looked shocked. I'm not racist. I have nothing against black people. I'm simply being practical. You're being racist, Naomi said quietly, finding her voice. You're making assumptions about my character, my motivations, and my intentions based on nothing but the color of my skin and some stereotypes you've internalized. I don't have to. Listen to this. Yes, you do, Ethan said firmly. Because you're in my house, talking about someone I care about, someone who has been nothing but professional and kind and helpful since the day she started working here. Someone you care about? Marianne's eyebrows rose. Ethan, please tell me you're not developing feelings for the help. Her name is Naomi, and what I'm developing is respect for someone who deserves it. The room fell silent. Naomi could feel the tension crackling between Ethan and his aunt, could see the hurt and anger in both their faces. I should go, she said quietly. No. Ethan turned to her. Please don't go, not because of this. She's right about one thing, Naomi said. People will talk, and that could cause problems for you. Let them talk. I don't care anymore." But Naomi could see that he did care, at least a little, could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the way he was looking between her and Marianne. "Maybe I should give you two some time to talk," she said. "I'll go get dressed and then head home for a while, give you some space." "Naomi, it's okay, really. We both need time to think about this anyway." 20 minutes later, Naomi was dressed and ready to leave. Ethan walked her to the door while Marianne waited in the kitchen. "I'm sorry about that," he said. "About what she said. About the assumptions she made. It's not your fault, and it's not the first time I've heard things like that. That doesn't make it okay." "No, it doesn't." She looked at him carefully. "But it does raise some questions we probably need to think about." "What kind of questions?" "About what's happening between us, about whether you're ready to deal with the complications that come with caring about someone like me." "Someone like you?" "A black woman, in a world where your aunt's reaction isn't unusual, where people will make assumptions and judgments and comments wherever we go." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Is that why you think I should care about you? Because you're black?" "No, I think you should care about me because of who I am as a person. But I also think you need to be honest about whether you're ready for the reality of what that means in the world we live in. And if I'm not ready, then we figure that out. But we have to be honest about it." He nodded slowly. "Will you come back? Tomorrow, I mean. For work." "Do you want me to?" "Yes, more than I can explain." "Then I'll be here." As Naomi drove home, she thought about Marianne's words and Ethan's response to them, about the way he'd defended her, stood up for her, refused to let his aunt's prejudice go unchallenged. But she also thought about the moment of uncertainty she'd seen in his eyes, the way he'd looked torn between loyalty to his family and whatever feelings were developing between them. She understood that uncertainty. Caring about someone across racial lines was complicated in ways that people who'd never experienced it couldn't fully understand. There would always be comments, assumptions, challenges from people who thought they knew better. The question was whether what was growing between them was strong enough to weather those challenges, whether Ethan was ready to choose her over the approval of people like his aunt, whether she was ready to risk her heart on someone who might not be able to make that choice when it really mattered. Back at the house, Ethan found Marianne in the living room, looking at the photos on the mantel. She was holding the picture of him and Emma, the one from their last vacation together. "She was so beautiful," Marianne said softly. "So perfect for you." Yes, she was. This woman, this Naomi, she's nothing like Emma. No, she's not. Emma was gentle, sweet. She would never have spoken to me the way that woman did. Ethan sat down across from his aunt, choosing his words carefully. Emma was those things. But she was also strong when she needed to be. She stood up for what she believed in. She didn't back down from difficult conversations. That's different. Is it? Or is it just that when Emma stood up for herself, you didn't see it as threatening? Marianne set down the photo. What's that supposed to mean? It means I think you're more comfortable with black women when they stay in their place, when they're quiet and grateful and don't challenge your assumptions about who they should be. That's not fair, isn't it? You called her the help. You suggested she was taking advantage of me. You made assumptions about her character based on nothing but prejudice. I was trying to protect you. From what? From someone who cared enough to save my life? From someone who's shown me nothing but kindness and professionalism? From someone who makes me feel like maybe I don't have to be alone forever? Marianne's face softened. Oh, honey, you're not thinking clearly. It's too soon. You're vulnerable. And this woman was here at the right time, but that doesn't mean what? That I can't have feelings for her? That I can't trust my own judgment about who she is? It means you need to be careful. I've seen this before, Ethan. Women who target widowers, especially wealthy ones, they present themselves as caregivers, as helpers, but really they're looking for security, for a way to improve their situation. Ethan stood up, anger flooding through him. Listen to yourself. You're describing Naomi like she's some kind of predator instead of a woman who saved my life and asked for nothing in return. I'm just saying you should be cautious. About black women specifically? Or just women in general? about anyone who might take advantage of your grief. And you think Naomi is doing that? I think she's a smart woman who saw an opportunity. What opportunity? To cook healthy meals for someone who barely speaks to her, to deal with my hostility and prejudice, to stay overnight to help someone through a medical crisis? His voice rose. If she was looking for an opportunity, Aunt Marianne, she chose a pretty terrible one. You're not seeing clearly. No, I think I'm seeing more clearly than I have in 2 years. He looked at the photo of Emma, then back at his aunt. Emma would be ashamed of what you said today. She would be ashamed of the assumptions you made about someone based on the color of their skin. Don't you dare tell me what Emma would think. I lived with her for 5 years. I know exactly what she would think. She would like Naomi. She would appreciate her strength, her kindness, her intelligence. She would never judge her the way you just did. Marianne was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. I just don't want to see you get hurt again. I know, and I love you for that. But you can't protect me from life, and you can't protect me from making my own choices about who to trust. So you're choosing her over family? I'm choosing to judge people by their actions instead of their race. I'm choosing to stop living in fear. I'm choosing to believe that Emma would want me to be happy, even if that happiness looks different than what she and I had together. He sat back down, his anger cooling into something calmer but no less determined. Marianne, you raised me after my parents died. You taught me about kindness and fairness and treating people with respect. Those lessons mean something to me. They're part of who I am. I know. Then trust that I'm applying those lessons now. Trust that I can see who Naomi really is, not just the stereotype you're projecting onto her. Looked around the living room, taking in the tidiness, the care that had clearly been taken with cleaning and organizing. She does seem to take good care of the house. She takes good care of everything, including me. And you have feelings for her. It wasn't a question, and Ethan didn't treat it like one. Yes, I do. What kind of feelings? The kind that scare me because they're real. The kind that make me want to be a better person. The kind that make me think maybe I don't have to spend the rest of my life alone. Marianne sighed. I suppose I could have been more polite. You could have been more human. That's harsh, but true. She was quiet for several minutes, staring at her hands. If she makes you happy, she does, then I suppose I should give her a chance. Not for my sake, for your own, because she's worth knowing, and you'll be better for knowing her. After Marianne left, Ethan sat alone in his living room, thinking about the conversation and what it meant for his future. About the choice he'd made to defend Naomi, to stand up for what he believed was right. For the first time in 2 years, he'd chosen connection over protection, trust over fear. It felt terrifying and liberating all at the same time. Now he just had to hope that Naomi would give him a chance to prove that his choice was real, and that what was growing between them was worth the complications it would inevitably bring. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Marianne. 2 weeks of careful conversations and shared meals and the slow rebuilding of trust. Naomi came to work each morning, and Ethan looked forward to her arrival in a way that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with the quiet comfort of her presence. They talked more now, about books, about their families, about dreams they'd put aside and hopes they were slowly rediscovering. The professional distance had completely dissolved, replaced by something warmer, more personal, something that felt dangerously close to love. On a Friday afternoon, Naomi was preparing dinner when her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and smiled. Hey, Clara. Hey yourself. How's the mysterious client treating you these days? Clara was Naomi's best friend, a nurse who had strong opinions about most things and wasn't shy about sharing them. She'd been skeptical about the job with Ethan from the beginning. He's different than I expected. Different how? Still making racist comments? No, nothing like that. Actually, he's been wonderful. Kind, thoughtful, interesting to talk to. Interesting to talk to? Clara's voice sharpened with curiosity. Naomi, please tell me you're not catching feelings for this man. Naomi glanced toward the living room, where Ethan was reading. They'd grown comfortable enough that he often worked from home now, their routines intertwining in ways that felt natural. I might be, she admitted quietly. Oh, honey, tell me everything. For the next 20 minutes, Naomi found herself describing the past few weeks. The way Ethan made her laugh, the way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her thoughts and opinions mattered, the way he'd stood up to his aunt, defended her, chosen her side when it would have been easier to stay neutral. He sounds amazing, Clara said when she finished. Almost too amazing. Are you sure you're not romanticizing him because of the dramatic way things started? What do you mean? I mean, you literally saved his life, Naomi. That creates a certain intensity, a bond that might feel deeper than it actually is. The words hit closer to home than Naomi wanted to admit. She'd wondered the same thing herself. Was what she felt for Ethan real, or was it just the result of sharing a crisis together? I don't know, she said honestly. What does your gut tell you? Before Naomi could answer, she heard Ethan's voice from the living room. Naomi, could you come here for a minute? She found him standing by the window, holding an envelope. What is it? A job offer from a firm in Seattle. They want me to relocate, lead a new sustainable architecture division. He looked at the letter, then at her. It's exactly the kind of opportunity I used to dream about. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Is it wonderful? He set the letter down on the coffee table, because accepting it would mean leaving here, leaving you. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. This was the conversation they'd been dancing around for weeks, the one about what was happening between them and where it might lead. You should take it, Naomi said. You should follow your dreams. What if my dreams are changing? Ethan, I'm serious. 6 months ago, all I wanted was to be left alone, to work and come home and not have to deal with people or feelings or complications. But now? He moved closer to her. Now I can't imagine my life without you in it. Naomi's heart raced, but alongside the joy was a familiar fear. The fear that came with caring about someone who could leave, who could change their mind, who could decide that what they felt wasn't strong enough to overcome the obstacles they'd face. We barely know each other, she said. I know you saved my life. I know you make me laugh. I know you challenge me to be better than I was. I know I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in years. Trust built in crisis isn't always reliable. The words came out harsher than she'd intended, but they reflected her deepest worry. What if this feeling between them was just the result of heightened emotions and forced proximity? What if it wouldn't survive the test of normal, everyday life? Ethan stepped back, hurt flickering across his face. Is that what you think this is? Some kind of trauma response? I don't know what to think. Then let me help you figure it out. He picked up his phone. Have dinner with me tonight. Not here, not as my chef, but as yourself. Let's go somewhere public, somewhere normal, and see how this feels when we're just two people getting to know each other. Ethan, one dinner. If it feels forced or artificial or like we're just two people caught up in the drama of how we met, then we'll know. But if it feels real, then what? Then we figure out what comes next. Together. An hour later, they were sitting across from each other in a small Italian restaurant downtown. Ethan had chosen the place carefully, somewhere quiet but not intimate, somewhere they could talk without the weight of his house and their history pressing down on them. For the first time since she'd started working for him, Naomi saw him in a completely different context. He was charming with the waitress, funny when he told stories about his work, thoughtful when he asked about her dreams of opening her own catering business someday. He was also nervous, she realized. His hands fidgeted with his napkin, and he kept glancing around the restaurant like he was worried about something. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing's wrong. I keep waiting for someone to stare or make a comment or give us looks. About what? About us, a black woman and a white man having dinner together. I know it's 2025. I know things are better than they used to be, but I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about the complications that come with caring about someone like you, about whether I'm ready for the reality of what that means. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. And what have you decided? I've decided that I don't care what strangers think, but I do care what it means for you. I don't want to put you in situations where you have to deal with people like my aunt. I don't want to make your life harder. What if I'm willing to deal with it? Are you? Naomi considered the question. Was she willing to deal with the stares, the comments, the assumptions? Was she willing to navigate the complexity of loving someone across racial lines in a world that still had strong opinions about such things? I've been dealing with racism my whole life, she said finally. The question isn't whether I can handle it. The question is whether you can handle it when it gets directed at both of us. I think I proved that with Marianne. Marianne is family. She loves you, even when she disagrees with you. What about strangers? What about professional situations? What about when defending me might cost you something? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he said honestly. I'd like to think I'd always choose you, always stand up for us, but I've never been in that situation before. At least you're honest about it. Is honesty enough? Before Naomi could answer, she noticed a couple at a nearby table looking in their direction. The woman whispered something to her companion, who glanced over and frowned. Ethan followed her gaze and saw what she'd seen. His jaw tightened. Ignore them, Naomi said quietly. How can you be so calm about it? Practice. And because getting upset about every ignorant person I encounter would be exhausting, the couple continued to stare and whisper. Finally, the man stood up and walked over to their table. Excuse me, he said, addressing Ethan. I don't mean to intrude, but I wanted to say thank you. Ethan looked confused. Thank you for what? For your presentation last month at the Sustainable Housing Conference. Your ideas about affordable green building changed the way our firm approaches low-income projects. Relief flooded Ethan's face. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad it was helpful. The man smiled and returned to his table. Ethan looked at Naomi sheepishly. I assumed the worst. So did I, she admitted. Is that what it's going to be like? Always wondering, always assuming, always being on guard? Sometimes, but not always. Most people don't care as much as we think they do. They finished dinner talking about lighter things, movies they'd enjoyed, places they'd traveled, books that had changed their perspectives. By the time they left the restaurant, Naomi had to admit that Clara's concerns seemed unfounded. This wasn't just crisis bonding or trauma response. This was real connection between two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Walking back to Ethan's car, he stopped suddenly and turned to her. I need to tell you something. What? I'm falling in love with you. Not because you saved my life, not because I'm lonely or grieving or looking for someone to fix me, but because of who you are when you laugh at my stupid jokes, because of the way you handle difficult situations with grace, because you make me want to be braver than I've ever been. Naomi's breath caught. Ethan, I know it's complicated. I know there will be challenges. I know I might mess up sometimes, might not always know the right thing to say or do, but I want to try. I want to figure it out with you. What about Seattle? What about it? It's an amazing opportunity. You shouldn't give up your dreams for... You're not stopping me from pursuing my dreams. You're helping me realize what my dreams actually are. He reached for her hands. Come with me. What? Come with me to Seattle. Start that catering business you talked about. Build something new with me. You're asking me to uproot my whole life for someone I've known for a month. I'm asking you to take a chance on something that feels bigger than both of us. Naomi looked into his eyes and saw hope, fear, and absolute sincerity. This man who'd started by telling her he could never trust a black woman was asking her to move across the country with him, to build a life together. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. But I'm more scared of letting this slip away because we were too afraid to reach for it. What if we're wrong? What if this doesn't work? What if we're right? What if this is exactly what we're both supposed to be doing? 3 months later, Naomi stood in the kitchen of their new apartment in Seattle, watching Ethan attempt to cook breakfast. He was terrible at it, but he tried every morning, wanting to contribute something to their shared routine. You're burning the eggs, she said, moving to help him. I'm creating a rustic, artisanal breakfast experience. You're creating charcoal. She took over the cooking while he made coffee, their movements around each other practiced and comfortable. Through the window they could see the Space Needle in Elliott Bay, reminders that they'd actually done it, picked up their lives and moved across the country for love. It hadn't been easy. Leaving her clients, her friends, her familiar life had required more courage than Naomi knew she possessed. There had been moments of doubt, moments when she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. But there had also been moments like this one, when their life together felt so natural, so right, that she couldn't imagine choosing differently. "Lucas called yesterday," Ethan said, referring to his best friend back home. "He wants to visit next month." "That would be nice." And Marianne sent a care package, with a note apologizing again for how she acted. Naomi smiled. Marianne had been working hard to make amends, sending thoughtful gifts and asking genuine questions about Naomi's business. It would take time to fully rebuild that relationship, but they were making progress. "How are you feeling about the Henderson project?" she asked. Ethan's new job was everything he'd hoped for. Challenging work designing affordable, sustainable housing for underserved communities. It was the kind of work that mattered, that made a difference, that allowed him to use his skills for something bigger than profit. "Good. Nervous, but good. We break ground next month." "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of us." Naomi looked around their kitchen, smaller than Ethan's old one, but filled with life in a way his had never been. Her catering business was growing slowly but steadily, built on the foundation of the healthy, delicious meals she'd perfected while working for him. They'd built something beautiful together. Not perfect. They still had moments of miscommunication, still navigated the occasional awkward situation when people made assumptions about their relationship. But they'd learned to face those challenges together, to choose each other again and again. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Marianne hadn't insisted on hiring a chef?" Naomi asked. "Every day. But then I remember that you stayed even after I said those terrible things to you. You stayed because you saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself." "What was that?" "A man worth saving." He pulled her into his arms, and she marveled at how safe she felt there, how loved, how chosen. "I love you," he said, the words as easy and natural as breathing. "I love you too." Outside, Seattle was waking up, another day in their new life, their chosen life, their life built on the radical decision to trust each other despite every reason not to. Naomi Carter and Ethan Moore had learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone willing to grow, to change, to choose courage over fear every single day. And as they stood in their sunny kitchen, sharing breakfast and dreams and the quiet contentment of two people who'd found their way to each other, they knew they'd chosen well. The past had taught them about loss and betrayal and the danger of trusting too quickly. But the present was teaching them something more important, that healing was possible, that love could overcome fear, and that sometimes the best thing you could do was take a leap of faith with someone brave enough to jump with you. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.